12:30 now. I'm Anne-Marie Tiernan in for Karen Campbell today, and at this hour we're learning more about what happened inside that Supreme Court hearing on the Delphi murder case. It wrapped up within the last 30 minutes. It kicked off at 11 o'clock this morning. This particular hearing focused on requests from Richard Allen to the High Court to remove the special judge assigned to the case. He also asked to reinstate his original attorneys. Samantha Johnson and Bob Siegel were at that hearing today. Now they join us live outside the courtroom from the State House with what went down. Hey there, Sam.
Hi, Anne-Marie. That's right. Bob is going to join us here in just a moment, wrapping up what was left of the hearing from this morning. I think it's important to mention, you mentioned the past couple months, right? It's been filled with twists and turns and back and forth, a lot of drama between both sides. Today, though, I can tell you there was one very clear point that both sides agree on, a concern to have to do this trial twice if the other side gets its way. In fact, we heard from one attorney today who said this trial will be for practice only. He said this trial is built in error, and if something doesn't change, they're afraid this won't end the way they intended it to in the first place. Now, we know Richard Allen was not in the courtroom today, but of course we heard from his representation. His attorney's main point today was that the judge has an absolute duty to adhere to Richard Allen's wishes. She went on to say, "My client deserves a trial now," and he says Richard Allen's right to a speedy trial is long gone by the judge at this point. One of the justices today called today's request from Richard Allen's attorneys extraordinary, but his attorney pushed back, saying if we don't get something done now, everyone will be heard by another delay. He says today's hearing is about much more than just a choice of counsel. It's also about an interference of counsel and a right to counsel for Richard Allen. Now, like we mentioned, Richard Allen not in the courtroom today. Neither was Judge Francis Gull, the special judge in this case. Our Bob Siegel was in that courtroom today to hear firsthand the arguments. Of course, we also heard from representation of Judge Gull.
We did, and Judge Gull's attorneys really talked about how the justices should not really intervene any further in this case because they were saying judges are generally given tremendous amount of discretion in cases, and her attorneys said that the judge didn't abuse her discretion. They also said Richard Allen can take all these issues up on appeal after the trial as opposed to the Supreme Court intervening further in this case right now. And I've got to point out that the justices did not seem particularly keen on those arguments. They are concerned about irrevocable errors being introduced already into this case that would cause this whole case to have to go on appeal down the road. So there was definitely a sense from the justices and the questions that they asked today that they might be receptive to the idea of reappointing Richard Allen's original counsel back on the case.
Yeah, and to your point, you and I spoke a moment ago, we heard several times today those justices saying, what's the harm, right? What's the harm in going back to how this case was and then seeing how it play out legally?
Yeah, and there's also this sense from the justices. We heard Chief Justice Rush ask, did the judge actually go further than she should have? Did she abuse the authority that she has? There's not a record necessarily to establish whether or not there was truly any abuses or ineffective counsel presented in this case. One of the justices said it seemed to him that the judge was confusing the attorneys for Richard Allen, the original attorneys, whether they were ineffective, as the judge said, or whether they were insubordinate, just not going along with what the judge asked them to do. Two very different things which could impact whether or not those original attorneys are reappointed back to the case by the justices.
We know today's hearing was essentially procedural, but we've talked several times about how this is really monumental in moving this case forward. So as for what comes next, we know cases like this typically can take months, right, to get a verdict or a decision, so to speak. But the third point today was making sure that Richard Allen gets a speedy trial. So when can we expect some sort of decision?
Yeah, the court has made clear to us that there is no specific time frame, but Chief Justice Rush, the last thing she said before all the justices rose and left the chambers was, we will deal with this just as quickly as possible. So again, the right of a speedy trial here, it was brought up over and over again. The justices seem very intent on trying to make sure that that right of Richard Allen is not violated. So we would expect to have something within a few weeks as opposed to what is normally a few months that we would wait for some decision from the Supreme Court.
Well, it was certainly a big day here inside the Indiana State Supreme Court. We know you're going to break it down for us more tonight on 13 News, more sound from both sides as well. So Anne Marie, as we wrap up here, we'll send it back to you guys in the studio for now.
Well, Sam, we did see that the families there, the families of these two teenage girls that were killed 7 years ago in February, were at those proceedings today. Explain how the gag order is affecting our ability to hear their thoughts on the proceedings today.
Yeah, good question. And typically when we've seen those family members, they are escorted in and out by state police, right? It was good to see them here again today because we know typically when these hearings are in Carroll County, they've been to every single one of them, right? So it was good to see them here again today.
Yeah, all the key investigators on this case were here today. State police were here today. I had a chance to talk to both of the original attorneys, both Andrew Baldwin and Brad Rosie. Both of them said at this point, again, they're leery of saying anything. There is a gag order, as you mentioned, Anne Marie, so they're really not supposed to be speaking outside of the courtroom proceedings. One of them did tell me they have plenty that they would like to say, as you can probably imagine, but again, I think what we're going to have to wait for in these future cases, in these future hearings, is to hear what they have to say inside the courtroom if they are reappointed.
And one quick note, if we have time, Anne Marie, we have always seen the families of Abby and Libby. Did you see Richard Allen's family today?
She may have been here today. I did not see Kathy Allen in the courtroom. I was looking around. I was in the back row as all the journalists in the courtroom were today, and as I could look around, I did not see her. Again, we were told by the attorneys for Richard Allen that there was a lot of thought into whether or not he would be in court today. I assume there was also a lot of thought into whether or not it made sense for her to be in court today.
A lot of details here, Anne Marie. Of course, more tonight on 13 News.
Sam and Bob reporting live for us. Thanks so much. Kathy Allen, the wife of Richard Allen, the defendant in this case. We're staying on top of the developments. In fact, we're even talking to a legal analyst this afternoon to give some expert insight into the proceedings today, and we'll bring that to you on 13 News here at 4. Of course, everything from this morning is available online right now at WTHR.com.